Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. On this episode, we help celebrate a great milestone and anniversary with Simon Rodrigue, Chief Digital Officer of Staples Canada. We look at the brand and mission transformation of Staples just over a year ago, and Simon talks about the team and technology stack assembled to re-platform and reimagine the online and digital presence of one of Canada's top e-commerce sites. Next, Andrew Resnick, veteran retail operator, joins me on the podcast as we catch up after working together in our past lives together to talk about the key operational elements of executing online digital strategies in-store, and now the outsized demands placed on retailers coast to coast of curbside pickup that formed a lifeline or a new customer experience marker of the COVID-19 era. But first, let's check in with Simon from Staples. Simon, welcome to The Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
Great, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Well, you and I have known each other for many, many years. It's great to speak with you again. I wish we were doing this in person. We tried to get together in person once or twice, but then events overtook that initiative. It's wonderful to be able to talk to you, though, and catch up now after the amazing rush or crush or sledgehammer or shockwave of COVID. But let's start at the beginning. Tell for those less familiar or who may not know you, tell us a little bit about your personal professional journey and what you do at Staples.
Thanks. So I've been in e-commerce for over 15 years, and it's my whole career has really been about digitally transforming companies. So early on, had the opportunity of helping Home Depot launch their first foray into e-commerce. Did some work with Sears, Travelocity in both Canada and the US, was at Walmart in their really big initial push into e-commerce, the initial grocery launch that everyone is making so much use of today. Had a period where I did some consulting, played around with some teeny little startups more to understand how e-commerce was changing. And then had the opportunity a little over 2 years ago to join Staples Canada. So Staples Canada had just been acquired by Sycamore Partners and had been kind of separated into three companies. And Staples Canada was really looking at kind of transforming and growing what was a very strong brand in the Canadian marketplace. They asked me to join as the Chief Digital Officer. And I really have two responsibilities at Staples Canada. So one is our digital business, which is staples.ca, which supports both business and consumers, and really supports a lot of the interactions we have with people going into the stores and all of that. And then all of the supply chain and customer service that supports that. And then the other side of it, which was newer for me, was more a B2B side. So if you look at what Staples does in Canada is really help out a lot of these small, medium businesses. We have a business called Staples Preferred, which is all about helping enable small, medium businesses to grow. And that's really the buying team and account management team that helps support that. And it's a very digitally focused business. And it's been really exciting, getting my teeth into that and kind of really driving the overall business over the last 2 years.
Now, 15 years makes you a grizzled veteran in this e-commerce business, and I believe at Home Depot you were on the buying side. You came over from the merchant side, right, to take over that and get into e-commerce. So certainly familiar with it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's actually a very funny story because before, actually, I was at Nortel Network, so I nothing to do with e-commerce, but it was in the technology side. We were helping companies figure out the internet, and I joined Home Depot. I was a merchant. Kind of really enjoying the buying. It's still, I love products and the whole merchandising aspect of retail. And they were launching the e-commerce business, and they came to me with, "You worked at Nortel, you must know about e-com. Would you be interested in this?" So I said, "Sure." And that kind of started down my path, right? Yeah. So it's, very, very, I kind of stumbled into e-commerce, but it was a great stumble and absolutely love it.
Now, what took you, I'm curious, what took you to Home Depot, like to go from Nortel to being a merchant in the big box hardware sector? Were you a do-it-yourselfer, or is it just time for a change in careers? That's a bit of a transition.
Yeah, I had always had retail blood in my veins, and if I go way back, my parents owned a sports store when I was growing up. So from 14 to 18, I would work in the store, and then when I went to university, I actually worked at Home Hardware. For that period of time, I worked there. While I was balancing going through school. So Nortel was probably the pivot in my career, but that was at the time where Nortel was really big in Ottawa. I was at Carleton University and joined them. And when Nortel ended, and we don't need to tell that story, I think everyone knows what happened there. The opportunity came back to join Home Depot in a leadership development program. So I think it was just a great fit for me, that love of retail, working with customers. And I think what's great about retail, and I think this is what I even love more, why I even love e-commerce more, is it's that immediate reaction to I do A and I get result B. So it's not like long life cycles of, if I do A in 2 years, I'm going to see the results. In retail and even more in e-commerce, you can see the impact of changes right away, and you get into that optimization and how do you service that customer and understand what they need and drive it forward. So I think I've been a retail person my whole life, even when I was kind of growing up and figuring out what career I wanted, and I would assume it's going to continue. I just love what you can do with this platform we have in the retail industry, the service that you can give to customers, and how you can really help customers overall.
Well, let's talk about Staples a little bit. You were brought on as part of as you said, after they were acquired and had some new breath in the lungs, so to speak, and really took on a pretty major project over the past 18 months. The rebranding. Joe Jackman and his team and doing the work on the rebranding. But really, let's talk about the digital transformation. Talk about what you've been up to for the past 18 months or a year, and where you started and where you've wound up.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting, and I think what's been most exciting about this transformation is that it hasn't just been a marketing transformation. We really took a look at our business and said, what do we need to do to kind of take this company forward? And the advantage that Staples, has in the Canadian marketplace is that people generally love Staples. We've got a great footprint. We've got a great customer base. We're helping businesses in Canada and grow. We're there during key points of the season for, back to school. And, everyone has great experiences with Staples. And the thing for us was, how do we kind of pivot from that office supply type warehouse to this company that can help you work and learn? And that's really what you've seen with the Staples. We're the working and learning company now. And really our passion is all about helping Canadians work, learn, and grow. And, part of that, we needed to update our digital experience. So we were on a platform that we had to decide if we were going to continue going forward with. It was a homegrown platform or go forward. So, and what's actually really exciting in this podcast is next week is our 1-year anniversary of the site relaunch.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thanks. So this time last year, we were kind of finalizing and fixing those last minute bugs that always happen in a site launch. And I know you know that. And, so for us, which was a very rapid time frame, we essentially rebuilt our whole digital platform. So the front end, the back end systems, our customer service systems, and our data layer in about 6 months. So something that I had never done before in my career. And we partnered with some great companies. So Shopify Plus is our platform that we operate on. And, companies like Bold Commerce out of Winnipeg is one of our key development partners and still is today. That really allowed us to kind of hit the ground running and move forward. And I think for us, it was all about e-commerce has changed. And you don't necessarily need to build or use these old legacy type platforms. Is how do we figure out what our customers want and build a very agile platform around that let really highly capable teams leverage that platform to bring the experience you need. And for us, it was all about how do we make sure we have the right data on the customer so that, we can service them better. How do we make sure we've got a great agile experience? And a great story there is, when this whirlwind of COVID hit us, curbside became more and more important. And we didn't have a curbside offering at Staples. So, working with the operations team and really taking an agile approach, we were able to get a curbside delivery program up and running in less than 2 days. So you just think about that. And that's fully rolling it out over 300 stores. The commitment of the organization in operations and marketing in technology, we would have never been able to do that before. So, it's getting the right people with the right platform and definitely we've learned a lot over the last year, but really excited with where we've come and how we've kind of continued to evolve and iterate on it. And some really exciting things coming in the next couple of months and the next year. And we're really going to take this to the next level.
Well, let's hang on that note for a bit. And it's so fascinating listening to you. As you know, I launched HBC.com in 2000, where it was like, you needed $1 million just to figure out how to take a credit card. The world has changed so much. And as you thought about that, you mentioned a couple of things that I know you're passionate about, agile development and this kind of new platform and being able to pivot quickly and focus on the consumer. As you started that journey, take me back, what is it, 18 months, a year from launch and 6 months in development. What were the key things you were looking for, the kind of one or two things as you launched that platform? Because I know retailers that are listening, many are now saying, now is the time, right? We've had this sudden great acceleration of e-commerce across the board, and maybe now it's time to re-platform. Maybe I need to re-platform, and how should I do that? What are the kind of couple, three things that really led you to choose which partners you're going to choose, and then the approach you were going to take? I think you've already touched on the agility component, but how do you make so much choice? How did you make your choices, and what were your driving key points?
Yeah, so I think there's a core tenet, and I think it's a foundational layer. We have built an incredible organization at Staples Canada, and one of the things we do whenever we analyze these projects or look forward to build, and I think now's the best time. Like if you haven't replatformed or you haven't re-looked at your digital technologies, now is the perfect time. We've moved, like some people have said, we've moved forward 10 years, and we've definitely jumped forward. It's definitely been a big skip. Probably the plans that you had in the last couple of years don't make sense for what we're going to see in the next move, moving forward. So having a really good team, it's not about the technology necessarily. It's about the team that's going to understand how to leverage the technology. So I think step one is making sure that you've got the right people. And for us, it was like product management, making sure we had a very strong product management org that could start understanding, here's what our customers want. Here's how we can deliver it. And then what's the technology that best optimizes that? The other thing, and I'm a big fan of, I don't believe that you win in e-commerce by building your own technology. I think that, there are, as a retailer, there are people that are much better at building technology than we ever will be. So you've got to kind of build these best of breed type models. And you've got to look for platforms that have ecosystems that things can plug into very easily. And, I think a great example, of that is we made a mistake at launch where we on the old website, we had a list feature that customers weren't really using from a transactional perspective. But when we relaunched the site, it was one of those things we just couldn't, sometimes you just can't get everything in you had planned to get in for launch. Yeah. Lists were one of those things that had kind of dropped off. And customers started calling us saying, hey, I really liked lists. I might not have used it in my purchase, but it was for me as an office manager or for a teacher, here's the 30 things I buy on a regular basis. I need that in a list. So it was a miss on our part. And we were able to quickly iterate and get something launched in a couple of weeks. And I look back to, like your example of it's $1 million to take a credit card online. I look back to some of the other businesses I've worked with and when we launched lists and how there were 6-month projects and tens, if not hundreds of people working on it and all of the efforts. And the ecosystem we've kind of built, with Shopify at the core has allowed us to kind of say we can get in and out of things really quickly, which I think that, agility is not just a methodology. It's how you kind of view the platform. I think the second thing after kind of that buy versus build ecosystem type thing would be your total cost of ownership. So really understanding what it costs you to run the digital business. And you need to evaluate that. And part of it is it's not just the cost of getting the site launched. It's the cost of, keeping it running over time and then also making those improvements. So it's partnering, because we're, in our model, we're buying versus building. We're picking partners that we know have great roadmaps. They're going to help us go forward. And, we believe that it's about the customer experience, the products, the merchandising. That's what retailers do versus the core technology. So it's really understanding that these partners you pick have great roadmaps kind of moving forward. And I truly believe that we do that. And I think the third thing for us, when we went through this process, and it's very, very hard to do, is all around how do you make sure that you're simplifying your business? And in a lot of cases, we had this opportunity. We were doing a massive reset. So we replaced all of our customer service systems. We just picked one system versus the 8 we had before. And, it was Zendesk. And, that's allowed us to kind of, have one single point of a system that manages all of that. We built a new data layer that we just kind of said, everyone needs to plug into this or you kind of can't go forward with it. And then even with our core systems, like we put a new order management system in. It's a company out of Vancouver called OrderBot. Let's adjust some of our business practices so it fits with their system versus having their system have to be customized to fit into what we're doing. Right. And if I look back over the last year, what that's allowed us to do is really use these platforms as they were intended, and run leaner organizations than I've ever had before, and be more able to adapt to changing businesses, because you aren't having to worry about, well, we really customized this piece of technology to fit our business process. It's like we took a look at it and we've changed some of our processes to fit how the technology works. So I think that at a high,
that's such an interesting point. You made several great points. I mean, if you have to be careful that you don't customize your product. And the habit was to customize it, and then your vendor doesn't even recognize it anymore. So when something 100%. Breaks, they're like, we don't know how to fix it because you changed so much of it. Versus flexing, choosing the right platform. And I loved your idea about not just getting into features, your list example, but also sunsetting features. Right, like you wind up after several years of building your own stuff, and you've got 10 features that you built, but nobody wants anymore. And they're just weighing down the platform, right? Somebody's got to maintain them and they're just weighing down the platform. I love your idea of, being able to get in and out of, kind of sunsetting features. It's very, very apropos.
Yeah. And I think that also gets down to that customization piece that you brought up. It gets down to the back. I mean, they all kind of interconnect, but it gets back to that total cost of ownership. Because if you're now on the hook to maintain it, you're there to, if something goes wrong, you've got to fix it. It adds significant overhead and potentially risk to your business. So we're very happy with the choices we made. I mean, we made a couple of kind of guiding rules that once we picked Shopify Plus as our core platform and Segment as our data layer, everyone that we worked with had to interconnect with those. So it made us, give us a real quick, time to market.
And a quick way to vet the vendors, right? Is do you integrate with our platform? Yes or no? That's a very simple first question, right? Yeah.
And then we also put everything in the cloud. So we have no servers or, code that we need to maintain ourselves. So, it's worked great to this point. I mean, I think that, there definitely was challenges and risks we took. I mean, there would have been safer choices for us to kind of go forward with, but we believed if you looked long term, this was definitely the best bet, and it definitely is playing out that way, and it's paid off for us.
Well, let's settle in on the current state of the business. I mean, in some ways, your business is architected for this crisis or this opportunity, and you've got a strong BOPIS network. You've got your own home delivery network, which is got to be one of the biggest advantages now, given the package fellas men and women are having such a hard time keeping up with the pace and sudden volume. What surprised you? What did you see in the as the volumes ramped up? You talked about introducing curbside because you had to. Yep. But what's the state of your business today in terms of volume and flexing to that kind of sudden demand?
Yeah, I mean, very, very proud of how the teams reacted to this. I mean, I think it's interesting too, because we see the pain that small, medium businesses are dealing with right now with our preferred business. The pivot there was more about how do we service and assist our customers through this time? So helping these small businesses that we deal with find the PPE that they need or urgent requests that they need to keep their business or transition their business to home. There's 85,000 businesses we deal with in our preferred program that were going through tough times, like many of the people listening to this call. So having someone there to really support them was kind of the pivot on that side of the business. On the staples.ca side, we had over 40 days of Black Friday type volume.
Wow.
Unexpected.
Wow.
Like, when Black Friday is happening, it's the end of November. Yeah. So you plan for that.
You plan for it all year.
Yeah. Yeah. So this kind of happened in 2 weeks. And I think that it really played to, the qualities of the teams we had, running the FCs and the operations network and the call centers. And we did some amazing things. So, we have, and for those of you that might not know on the call, we actually have 7 FCs across Canada. And we do have our own delivery network, or with partners that are dedicated to us that deliver 85% of our parcels, and we can do 80 to 90% of the country next day. So a very sophisticated network from that perspective, and they were able to flex up very quickly. So the furthest we fell behind with FC stock product was about 3 days, and that lasted for a week, and then we've been back to next day since then. So real kudos. You think about that Black Friday type volume hitting these FCs and these delivery networks, and we've been able to keep up, probably more so than any other digital or e-commerce player in Canada.
I think so. I mean, my personal experience, because I'm a small business as well, is as I've ordered several times from Staples during the COVID period, so to speak, and all the way to my home here to some partners out in Halifax, and you're right. I mean, the longest I waited was 3 days, but more commonly now 2, and now it's as you said, now it's settled into still, I'm sure, at a high volume. Of direct orders, but it's very impressive. I mean, it's very impressive.
Yeah, so the team's done a phenomenal job, and then you look at the call center side. Not only did we have to deal with volumes that were up, many multiples. Because you can imagine people are urgently wanting to get their products, or it's their first time shopping with Staples, or wanting to connect or understand what's going on in the stores. Our call centers experienced 4 to 8x type volume, all while we transitioned to working them from home.
Right.
So we've got call centers. We've got 3 kind of call centers in Canada, in Regina, Mississauga, and Laval. And then we have third parties in multiple locations in the world that help support us so we can do the 24/7 support. Essentially, everyone went work from home all within 1 week. So you can imagine the stress that provides to the network, and the teams did a phenomenal job. We did make the decision because with that volume, I mean, it's a simple math equation. You can't support all channels. So we decided to turn voice off, and anyone that's been in the call center channel knows voice is the least inefficient channel, and focused our support on chat and email. And we were off for about 8 weeks, and we actually hired a bunch of people and put them through training, and voice is now back live again. It went live 2 weeks ago again, so we're back live with everything. But we've always been giving great. There were times during COVID where you might have to wait 20 minutes for a chat or a couple days for an email answer, but we're back now to 60-second answer on the phone, chat within, less than a minute, and email within a day. And that's been a fairly significant investment for us, because we truly believe that this wasn't just a blip for us, is that our customers that are now working from home, wasn't a fad. It's a short-term trend. We believe that people are going to be working in their homes more, and we're uniquely positioned in that space. Learning from home, we're the leader in education supplies and assisting in people learning, and that's been a big thing for us. And then the small businesses transitioning, and even larger businesses. We've worked with a lot of large businesses that are taking 3, 4, 5,000 employees to home, saying we want to be able to enable these businesses. We want to enable our employees to be able to get their office supplies, their chairs, their desks, their printers. But I don't have a procurement department that can handle that. Can you guys do that? So we've come out with some very unique solutions where our preferred team is helping assist some of these businesses in, shipping out 300 chairs to employees all over Canada, or setting up office supply packs and things like that. So it's really uniquely positioned. And you go back to that first question you asked about our transformation. This is really we were really building for this. I mean, if you look at our mission is to help, Canadians work, learn, and grow. That's exactly what we're doing here. We're helping people transition in a very difficult time. And what is that new form of work? Whether it be I'm now working from home, or my business has new requirements, or I'm starting up a new business. How do you do that? And then the learning piece. Anyone in education today, whether it's teach from home, learn from home, remote distance learning, there's been different requirements. So really being able to assist people there. So, did we do it perfect every time? No. Could we do it better a lot of the time? Absolutely. But I think, the thing that's impressed me most is that the people, the team we've built, were really committed. And, we had a lot of people that didn't have a day off for, 30 plus days. And it wasn't because we were asking them. It's because we want to get this done. We know there's Canadians in need, and we've got to figure this out. Because if we don't, they aren't going to have the things they need to run their business or to teach their kids or, to complete their university, whatever it may be. And our technology, what normally would have panicked us, with that kind of the volumes we were putting through, our partners were phenomenal in keeping it up and running. So it kind of really points to that what we thought would be, a couple days a year with this peak traffic and change. And, we really pivoted the business, in a 2-month period to handle volumes that we weren't expecting many years from now.
Well, as you said, 40 straight days of Black Friday volume. I mean, I talked to retailers who said, that the sites were just getting punished, and it just really highlights, the scalability of the cloud type platforms more than anything else. So last couple of questions and their advice to listener type questions. So the first question is, as you think about talking to retailers who are not as far advanced on the digital journey as you are, 2 starts and 1 stop. So start doing these 2 things and stop doing this 1 thing.
So I think the first start, I would say, is invest in people. So this isn't a technology thing that you need to solve. It's a people thing. Make sure that you've got people that understand, like if you look at what a real good e-commerce professional is, it's not someone that's focused on the technology. It's someone that's focused on, here's what our customer's looking for, and how do I leverage, processes and technology to deliver it. So make sure you've got those right people in your organization and that they have the support you need. I mean, this goes back. I mean, you've been in e-com, you've been involved in e-com just as long as I have. A lot of the challenges with businesses going through digital transformation is they don't have the support of the senior leadership team. And I'm sure everyone's seen those jokes going around right now is, what drove digital transformation in your organization. And it wasn't the CDO. It wasn't, the director of digital marketing. It was COVID. And you really got to support this going forward because it's what customers want now. And I think it's going to kind of continue going forward. And then I think the second thing is don't be afraid to say, if we just started all over again, what would be that impact? And, as I've been around a lot, kind of walking into companies. And then, for the time I was doing a lot of, consulting, or I was on retainer for a lot of US companies going through digital transformation. You get hung up on, well, I've got to keep things the way they used to be. And that might be a piece of technology. It might be a process. And that often gets you hung up. It doesn't allow you to really take advantage of a lot of these next generation technologies like Shopify Plus that are out there. And I think the thing to stop is, don't think this is going to be an expense. Think of it more as an investment. And it's probably going to cost, if you focus on the people and you're willing to let go of some of the legacy, it's probably not going to cost you what it cost in the past. And I look back at all the retailers I talked about I worked at before, what I spent in the budgets there versus what we use to deliver our platform today, it's a fraction of the cost. And I think that's because we really focused on the 2 starts. And there are probably a lot of companies right now saying, I can't afford this right now. I can't afford this expense. And it's really an investment in your future. So, you need to have BOPIS. You probably need to have curbside. You need to make sure that you can deliver to home. You need to make sure that you can do it efficiently. Like part of the challenge, I think that people that haven't made the right investments here is people don't want to wait a week or 2 for an order. It leaves your company in a vulnerable position because they will go somewhere else. And as people transition from I go to the store to online, there's a cognitive behavior that resets. That I'm not, the brand affiliation isn't as strong. You get an opportunity to play. So I'm a dedicated staple shopper online. And when I go online to make that purchase, we know we're going to get a chance, but we also know they're going to check some other people out. So if your experience isn't up to par to what the customer expects, you have a good chance of losing them. And what COVID has done is it's forced people online that have never been online before. and it puts you at risk. And it's why you need to make strong investments in this channel if you aren't already doing so.
Well, it's both risk and opportunity. In other words, It's a jump ball moment, as Brian Pearson said on my last podcast. In other words, that people are considering brands they never considered before. They're shopping in ways they never shopped before. If you're a laggard, perhaps that's an opportunity. If you're a stalwart, there's risk because people are going to look to other places. They're going to break the habits that they've had for perhaps a lifetime. So it's a great point. Last question, you've talked about the importance of your team. That's clearly central to the DNA. Advice for managing all these people that are working at home as a leader. You don't have the same kind of mechanisms you had before. You talked about the passion of the team to work through these issues. What's your advice to leaders today who are managing teams at home? What's been the secret sauce for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a couple of things, and there's some very simple things, and then there's some things that take more commitment. So one of the things that we do, and it's actually a very interesting opportunity because we used to just do it at home office, but now we've extended across the whole org. Is we actually have a weekly e-commerce scrum. So we have over 100 people that join it, and we just a different leader every week. They talk a little bit about themselves, their organization, and then we just have people share the wins that they've accomplished during the week. So it's an opportunity for people to say, hey, here's something I launched, or a big customer we won, or something interesting that's going on. We have the leaders give an update on the business, just because you don't realize that because people aren't in the office, people lose touch of what's going on. So I have each of my 5 leaders kind of just give a quick 1 or 2 minute update on, what's going on in operations or the preferred business or front end development, back end development, site operations or whatever it may be. And then we allow it to be a Q&A. And, some weeks we get questions, some weeks we don't, but it's very interesting because it could be generally like, hey, I'm worried about this part of the business, or have you guys ever thought of that? So that's an investment and that's work, because if you aren't doing that today, but I think the interesting thing from us, what used to be a smaller group of just people at home office, now we have all of our FC managers and supervisors on the call, all of our call center teams on it now, our sales team. So it's really exciting because everyone gets an opportunity to have a conversation and it gets you closer to each other. 2 is, I spend a lot of time making sure that I'm talking to my leaders and people in the organization on a regular basis. So I used to walk around in the office a lot more, and I probably could be doing a better job of it. But one thing I do is I try to do digital walk around. So try not to ambush people, but just grab 15 minutes with different people in the organization just to see what's going on, kind of get their feedback and drive it. And I think the third thing, and this is just a really easy thing, but a lot of people struggle with it. As a leader, have a rule. If it's just for yourself, that's fine. Or if you want to push it on your organization, do it. When you're doing video conferences, have your video on. It creates a connection with people and a focus that you lose when it's just, you open up your Zoom or your Teams meeting and it's just a bunch of letters or pictures of people. I think if you can do that, you'll start seeing more people doing it. And it just helps with that connectivity. Because, you and I were talking before the podcast, a lot of people miss the connection. It's one of those things that, a lot of people like working from home, but if they can blend that with a little bit more connection, I think people will be able to preserve the culture and they'll enjoy working a lot more. And I think, we talk about post-COVID world. I think that hybrid model is what's going to win. You'll have people working from home, but there'll be ways that you can interact more and, still see your colleagues on a more regular basis versus going into the office every day or being at home 5 days a week.
Well, it's been a fascinating journey and great advice. And I can only imagine how busy you are and have been so busy. So thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me on the Voice of Retail's great exploration of a broad set of issues. I wish we had the opportunity to do this in person. It will come again, as you say, and a thanks to your team, because again, as a small business, there are several things I needed that I didn't have, and they were delivered, and it really helped. So a shout out to you and your team for keeping this small business going during the COVID crisis. So thank you for that, and again, thanks for making time to chat. It was great to catch up with you and learn more about what's happened, and please have a safe summer. And perhaps we'll touch base in the fall after we see what back to school brings us.
Yeah, it's good. It's definitely an interesting time. So again, thanks for the conversation, and thanks for letting us help you out. And for yourself or anyone else that's on the call, more than happy to talk. Or if your business needs help with anything, more than happy to see how Staples can help you out as well.
Sylvain Charlebois studies food supply chains daily.
On va parler avec Sylvain Charlebois, spécialiste de l'industrie agroalimentaire.
Let's bring in Sylvain Charlebois.
And joining us now to talk food security is Professor Sylvain Charlebois.
Sylvain Charlebois is the senior director.
Now joined by Sylvain Charlebois.
Sylvain Charlebois is my guest.
This is Sylvain Charlebois, and with our new podcast, The Food Professor, along with my co-host Michael LeBlanc from the Voice of Retail podcast, we'll dive into the recipe for the food, grocery, food service, and restaurant industries, discuss proprietary industry and consumer food-related research, check out fresh new ideas, and talk about whatever half-baked strategies are in the news this week.
So be sure and join Sylvain and I every 2 weeks for in-depth insights and great conversation. Find the Food Professor online and subscribe on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you enjoy your podcast today. Andrew, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Michael. How are you? It's great to talk to you again.
Well, Andrew, you and I worked together back at Herbal Magic. Crazy fun days. I miss working with you, but it's so great to connect. We connected earlier in the year in person, but just to connect to you, just chat about your insights into this such interesting time. You've got such a great background, and I wanted to pair this episode up in such a way. We just listened to Simon from Staples. I wanted to pair this issue up, so to speak, with not the other side, so to speak, because Simon did talk about the key of operations, but really that part of digital and physical that kind of merged together. And with your great experience in that, I thought you'd be fantastic to kind of pair up in this episode. But let's go back to starting at the beginning, so to speak. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and your professional journey. A bit about yourself.
Well, thanks, Michael. It reminds me of that line. Well, enough about me. Let's talk about you. How do you feel about me? So, Mike, as you know, I'm basically a career retail operator turned independent consultant advisor. My management career on the management side of things has consisted of running up to 800 stores and about 3,000 people. You and I, as you mentioned, worked shoulder to shoulder when you were CMO and I was COO for a brand that had a couple of hundred locations. On the consulting side, which I've been doing for the last few years, my experience as an operator has helped me because I'm able to sort of quickly understand the interdependencies, which, as you know, is a theme for me, that are needed to operationalize big initiatives, bringing together every function and every channel. I work with clients now of all sizes, primarily retail, some food service, and some other, because really when you think about it, anybody who's selling anything to anyone is a retailer. Clients range from startups to large public companies, and it's where my passion is. Being independent allows me more flexibility and tends to be a bit less intimidating, especially to small and mid-sized companies who hate conventional consultants. I'm using air quotes because, consultants are normally folks that come in, poke around, charge a lot of money, and leave behind a document, not telling you too much new. But if you could have operationalized it yourself, you probably would not have called them in. So in this case, I'm able to help them execute. I see myself and often refer to myself as a CEO sidecar, where I'm bolted on, top management, owner, or the senior management team for a while to see a project through to completion. Then you can sort of unhitch me, throw me in the garage and kind of reattach me as needed. But I'm somebody who can jump in with a fairly quick learning curve because of the experiences that you and I have shared together, right, where I sort of get it and CEOs of certain size companies, see that right away, and it's been great.
And I think part of that nimbleness of you and your approach is because you've worked in franchise-driven organizations as well as corporate. But in franchise organizations, it is a meeting of one sometimes, even though they could be, as you said, it could be 800 operators within a franchise. So you can kind of work. What I've always loved about working with you is you can work at both levels. The last time you and I were together, we were talking off mic about BOPIS, this buy online, pick up in store and of course, its cousin Boris, buy online, return in store. And we both know that this pre-COVID was growing. Consumers seem to love it. Now, we were talking about post-COVID, and not only do we now have the basic buy online, pick up in store, but we've got curbside. Let's pick up the conversation where we left off last time we were talking earlier in the year. It seems simple enough, but the complexities of operationalizing it are vast. And if retailers on the whole weren't ready for what was happening before, this acceleration of the COVID and the move to online and curbside as a lifeline, my goodness, what have you observed? I mean, it's crystallized some of those thoughts for you. What are your thoughts?
Michael, I truly believe that retailers with physical stores, with some exceptions, those that have limited parking and access, things like that, but for the most part, retailers with physical stores will never love anything other than in-store purchases. It's antithetical to their DNA. It's a necessary evil. BOPIS, curbside pickup, is a strictly necessary evil for a number of reasons. Operationally, as you mentioned, it's complex. It's costly. It takes people in and out of the stores. It moves merchandise back and forth. It is, as you know, the more times you touch something, the more expensive it becomes. It's costly to execute. And frankly, it's the enemy of store unit economics and optimization, right? It defeats the purpose of bringing people into your store. It's what I refer to as a sales prevention technique. Now, more importantly, it goes against every naturally occurring force in retail, which is the in-store experience, all the inputs that go into that, which you and I have lived together: merchandising, staff training and interaction and personalized selling, promotion, signage, collateral, messaging in the store environment, and how really sensual it is. It's tactile, it's music, it's visual, all these things that generate impulse sales, larger basket size, upsells, increased frequency, and so on. Keeping a customer out of the store is never something that a retailer will love. And I'm using the word love because there's a difference between making the best of it and embracing it and needing to build it out and loving it. There's too much cost involved in the conventional installed base of bricks and mortar stores for operators to pay that rent and stock it with inventory and then bring product out to the curb. This is strictly a necessary evil. That's my honest opinion about it. So as an incremental source of sales that represents a small percentage of transactions than BOPIS and their cousin and curbside pickup, it's now table stakes. So don't get me wrong; it has to be done. And in this unique time, it has been, and I'll use your word, which I think is a great one. It has been a lifeline, but bricks and mortar retailers will never really truly love it, especially given how retailers have been trying to differentiate themselves experientially. You've done all these podcasts and all these shows, and you've had all these great guests who've been, even in New York. I remember the show you did. You've got all these brands talking about, how important the experiential component is these days. And the more transactions that take place outside of the physical store, the more that's diluted. So
it's a bunch of great points. I got a bunch of follow-up questions, actually, because, in fact, this week I was talking to Tal Zvi from Showfields, which, was the experience store model is the hot idea, and he's updating me on what that looks like. That'll be in a future episode. But a couple of things. So one, it's a mother of necessity. I mean, it just needs to happen. Now, consumers, they'll love it, right? This is the challenge. I've done it myself, where I've done curbside. And I love it. I've actually got one to go pick up today. For me, it's a great experience. Not for everything. I love going into stores to explore, but listen, I wanted 10 bags of sheep manure. I just rather have you just put it in my car than go wander around the store. But is there an opportunity for great operators to turn that into part of the retail experience? In other words, curbside done well, whether it's a temporary blip of growth or whether it's one of those things that's going to be always a component of what you need to do, is it something that operators can do perfect and then therefore becomes part of the holistic overall experience?
No, Michael, that's a great question. And I think, the mother is the necessity. What is it? Necessity is the mother of invention is important here. Well, nobody would have imagined that we'd see a total shutdown of physical stores. And you can hardly fault retailers for being ill or under-equipped to handle the intense demand it created for these services. It did, to your point, certainly reveal to the customer which brands were nimble and responsive enough to pivot. I think when you look at competitors, even within specific categories, when you look at the grocers, when you look at apparel, health and beauty, electronics, sporting goods, general merchandise, you see which retailers were best able to seize this opportunity because either A, they already had started down this path, or B, they just grabbed a hold of it and realized that this is something they needed to reallocate their resources to. And you and I have talked at length about how customers now consume brands holistically. And it is now part of the brand and it is part of the experience. I think what these management teams have in common is that they were relatively well positioned, right, or well prepared to retool. And as I mentioned, reallocate their teams, their systems. And I credit leadership and the management teams for working together to understand that this is now we're starting to reopen, the way that consumers are going to interact with our retail brands. And one of the interesting sides is I think that we're also in a fairly forgiving time. I think people, not just retailers, but companies, people are getting credit for trying. No one was expecting it to be perfect, right?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that from both consumers, anecdotally, and from retailers who say, high marks for trying. It wasn't perfect. The experience wasn't perfect, but hey, we all understand these are unusual times kind of discussion, right? That's not going to last forever though, right?
No,
eventually the sharp operators will rise to the top. We just heard, you haven't heard it yet, but Simon describes how they did, pivoted to curbside in literally a day or days to reflect your point about some operators are more, ready to take that kind of task on. And eventually it does become a differentiator at the level of execution, right?
I think you're exactly right. I think winning at this, and you mentioned buy online, return in stores, which now that stores are reopening is, as you mentioned earlier, these are accelerants. So the extent to which you were getting, and I remember you and I talked about this when we met last time, the extent to which you were in a store and watching the returns from online come in. Now, I would say, I was in a mall the other day, I would say 60% of the people waiting in line to get into a store were returns. And it requires...
I think there's a tsunami of returns about to hit retail this summer. I mean, there's a lot of pent up returns sitting on there. Everything from a skid of toilet paper to whatever, right? There's a lot of stuff that's about to happen. So you better be good at handling returns.
You're exactly right. Embrace it, leverage it as best you can. It's an opportunity to shine at a time when, like I said, I think customers will give you credit for your efforts, and relatively speaking, they will be forgiving for your missteps if, and this is important, if you communicate earnestly, and if you make it clear to your customers that you really are trying to do, the best job that you can. And that starts, of course, with your staff. It requires redeploying team members, repurposing stores. To your point about, we even talked about this, a couple of months ago, repurposing stores to accommodate for those returns, training staff to contribute in new ways. And most importantly, I think, providing an environment of trust and collaboration, especially in times of ambiguity. Staff is uneasy. They're uncertain about pay. They're uncertain about their livelihood. Customers are uncertain. So providing a steady hand and leadership, I think, right now, and communicating transparently with customers across all touch points is really important.
It's a nice segue. I just wanted to get your advice for the listeners for the retailers out there of all sizes who are now faced with this new mechanics that are just operations that are just vastly of a bigger scale than there were before. We're talking about whether it's returns or pick up on store or this whole curbside thing. What are the kind of top pieces of advice to the operators, the regional managers, the people who are running those stores to be able to pivot to make that a smooth process? Is it the dedication of individuals? Like really tactically, what are the kind of the key elements that can make that either as painless as possible, or maybe there's some upside and kind of, if you like, would you like some fries with that kind of upselling or cross-selling? Or maybe that's just not on right now. Just get the order through. What's your kind of 1, 2, or 3, really practical pieces of advice for the store managers, the operators who you've been in that seat and you're advising people like that?
Well, I think, and this won't surprise you because I have a fairly consistent view on these things. I think it's whenever I'm asked a question about a specific, what happens within the four walls sort of issue, in this case, operationalizing and executing, I tend to zoom out. And, my perspective and advice is always that the best way to succeed, in store and every place that a customer engages with you is the same strategy as winning in any other initiative. And that is, and you and I lived and worked this together, getting everybody at the table, getting all of the inputs into what happens at that point of contact. I have now branded it, because the work I do with my clients now has morphed into sort of a workshop, and I call it catena. A catena is a Latin word which means a connected series of related things, sort of like a constellation in the sky. And when you look at stars in the sky, and the fact that we've created constellations, because obviously they don't exist, we also have to remember that it's a three-dimensional constellation, that the three stars we're looking at are not on the same plane. So catena, which is a way of thinking, is it really centers on a 3D interconnectivity throughout the organization, Michael. It's the interdependencies. We've got to move from a omni-channel mindset to a singular brand delivery mindset, with the customer firmly in the center, which is exactly what I believe your question is focusing on. How do you make each transaction, whether it's in the store, whether it's at the curb, or whether it's online, how do you make it consistent? And you can't do that without everybody contributing, whether or not they at the beginning might think they played a role in that transaction. And you and I have also talked about the fact that I believe a channel is simply a silo at a 90-degree angle. And we all know how well silos worked, right? We all know how many books and decades were spent trying to break down silos. But my goal here is not to avoid your question. It's really to suggest that there are so many inputs to those things that if it doesn't start with every function identifying their relative value at each stage. I do this workshop with clients on Catena, and you would be amazed. And we did this together. You and I did this together where someone else facilitated it, and it was based on that workshop that I've actually developed this, which is you'd be surprised how many times department heads come up to me after a workshop and tell me they've never before been included at the strategic or planning stage because their function is always considered just relevant from an execution perspective. So I believe in going upstream with it. It's more of a trickle up perspective than a trickle down perspective. And we always come out of these workshops with a sense of what I call organizational empathy, which is a genuine, often newfound understanding of what it takes to achieve common, complex goals as a team that don't appear to be common or complex when they're happening.
Well, and you and I have always shared the philosophy of this, for example, as marketing person, that we shared part of the in-store experience very deeply, right? It wasn't a kind of a handoff. Okay, I generated the lead, over to you. If it doesn't work out, it's your problem, your issue. There's a giant overlap. So on that theme, as you work through these workshops and as you talk to the leaders, what's your advice during the workshop or after or before to the counterparts, the colleagues of the operators, the marketers and the merchandisers who put it in the store? What are your kind of key things that you say, listen, for us all to be successful, this is the best way to work with us, and these are the kind of things you need to keep in mind?
That's a great question. And I apply that question, and I also reverse that question, because while I come from operations and I'm store and customer centric, it's partly all those other functions, understanding what their role is in operations and delivering that. It's also partly operational empathy for understanding what the other departments need to go through. I used to come into your office and say, how come you can't do this by tomorrow? And I would leave and you go, there goes Resnick again. The operator wanted it tomorrow. So there's actually a mutual learning that we go through. And I'll give you a specific example without getting too into the weeds is, you pick a functions, like training, and you say, okay, we need to roll out curbside pickup, and operations says we need to do it tomorrow, and marketing says we need to do it yesterday, and the CFO says we need to have done it 3 days ago. How long is it going to take? And you go around the room and everybody says, a week, 2 weeks, 3 days, and in training says 2 months. And everyone looks at the training department and says, 2 months. And they say, well, we have to train for it. We have to get human resources involved. There may be HR workplace safety components. We've got to roll out the training. We've got to make sure people are properly trained, that they're safe. They've got the equipment, and blah, 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 blah. And you realize, oh my God, I completely marginalized, fill in the blank, but in this case, training. It may be store construction, right? It may be distribution. It may be the size of the back rooms. So I think it's a reciprocal process. Everybody has got to understand not just their relative inputs, but the level of difficulty. It's like a dive, right? What's the relative for training? This may be a 5 in level of difficulty, where for marketing it may be a 2. And vice versa. So what I always come out with the advice I give is to have a culture that facilitates that level of collaboration, where you've got to take a breath and you've got to listen to what it's going to take, and then mutually decide on, okay, training, we don't have 2 months. This thing's going to be over in 3 days if we don't move on it. What's the best you can do? And then training says, well, what can you live with? What can you live without? And you take that and you apply it to every function. And I think you come out of it with this, beautifully empathetic, collaborative sort of, and you and I work through this. We'll walk down the hall beforehand and say, this is something I'm really needing to do before I get too carried away with it. Michael, can we noodle this together, and can I have a better understanding from your perspective of what you think this would take?
And just again, back to Simon talking about agility, being able to both have that. And he didn't use this term, but you'd be familiar with the kind of the minimal viable product, right? That kind of philosophy that perfect is the enemy of success, and how do we make sure that we just get it going if there's a timeline, but at the same time cover all our bases, make sure we can all execute, and then adjust as we drive towards perfection. Listen, it's a great conversation. How can people learn more about you or find out, get in touch, and all that stuff?
Well, I'm easy to reach. I'm at Andrew Resnick on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to reach me. And I just want to piggyback on your last comment as well. I think it was really, really well said. And in order for an organization to embrace whatever you want to call it, fast is better than good, sometimes, they've got to have the support of leadership, and they cannot be afraid to take risks. And leadership have got to embrace that. Risks need to be calculated, but we are living, especially now, in a very iterative environment. And if employees, whether it's at the store level or at the corporate level, if they are afraid to take risks, or if they're afraid to walk down the hall because they think they're going to get slapped around and sent home, that is the enemy of innovation. And that's probably more important now. It's always been important, but it's probably more important now than it's ever been, because we all really are going through this in real time.
Well, I love that iterative, that idea that we're in an iterative phrase. I think you really captured the moment. So thank you again, Andrew. It's always great to chat. I always learn a lot talking to you, and it's really been super to have you here on the podcast. So thank you, and listen, have a great rest of your week, and be safe.
Thank you, Michael. I love your podcast. I learn something every week, and you cover a tremendous amount of ground, and it's really, really very valuable content.
Well, thanks to Simon and Andrew for being my guests on this episode. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes, your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of Emmy LeBlanc Company, Inc. You can learn more about me on www.emmyleblanc.co, or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a safe week.